joining me on the podcast and on video is Russ Mould, Investment Director at stockbroker AJ Bell. You're right, Russ.
I'm absolutely perishing, actually. I'm sat in our kitchen and there's not much
Yeah.
heating on at the moment. My lovely lady wife has kicked me out of our office today because she's in there. So I'm sat. It's a lovely kitchen. Like, I can see lots of sunshine, but it is perishing down here in
Yeah.
Brighton.
Yeah, it is been freezing the last few days. And when you're a house like ours full of holes at the moment with no
Oh yeah.
radiators, it's literally we got I think one room we apart from my office in the garden, which is fine. My wife is sleeping in the attic at the moment, but she couldn't last night because it was like so cold. And then she moved to sort of a little snug room, and I'm sleeping in the office with my dog. But a couple of weeks left, and it should be done. But it is getting to the stage where it's painful. I often think, how do homeless people survive in this weather? It's
With
like
extreme
it's to walk
difficulty, I
outside is
think.
painful.
Yeah.
But
Extreme
anyway, it's
difficulty.
do you know what energy bills are saying? Ofcom was saying that cap is going up 21 quid.
2%.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
For
the
the
average price
average
is going to
bill.
be yeah. So that won't help inflation. But the average price is like 1,237 quid, I think it was, for a year. We just checked our energy bill for the month. My wife says 437 quid for the last month.
Well,
What? The house is
rather you than me
freezing.
is all I can say on that.
I know.
That's before
I
she's put
know.
the Christmas lights up as well, I would think.
Exactly. They haven't even put the lights on yet. So we've got
Oh,
Blackpool illuminations here when that happens. So funny things going on, Russ. Explain first of all. In fact, today PMI figures have come out across Europe and the UK and sales figures and dreadful. I mean, this is
yeah,
first of
they
all the
were great.
retail sales. Look at that, a third of what was expected, -3 for core retail sales, down to -9. Um, and then it's just dreadful. And then you go to Europe, look at their PMIs, they're all below 50 pretty much. In fact, some of them barely above low 40s. German manufacturing 43.2, German services 49. But even everywhere, France, Germany, the biggest economies are doing badly. And then even Europe as a whole, the services, the composite is 48.1. So that's in sort of contraction mode. And they come down to ours, and it's taken a turn for the worse there. Manufacturing is down to 48.6, expect to come in at 50.1. It was 49.9, expected to expand, it didn't. And even the services, our dominant sector, is flatlining. It's now expected to come in at 52.3. That's a big miss. And it's coming at 50. So that's
Yeah,
a little bit worrying, isn't it?
services is what 2/3 of output, but although manufacturing has a big multiplier effect, is the old
Yeah.
story, isn't it? So
Mm.
you people are in body manufacturing, then they go out and spend their wages in cafes and shops and bars. So it's not quite as simple as it looks, but in crude terms, services is about 2/3. It does suggest that things are slowing down. They are used as lead indicators, as you say. A score below 50 is generally seen to be a foretell of a slowdown or even a contraction, dare one say. And I guess this is the challenge that faces central banks, right? Because they're looking to um, avoid a recession, and we certainly can't really afford a deep recession because of all the debt that's in the system. That's not ideal at all. The UK is just tottering out of a shallow recession in theory,
Mm.
but at the same time, inflation hasn't been below target in the US since February 2021. It's just popped back above target here in the UK. It's been sticky generally around most of the Western world, and so that's the challenge. They're trying to promote growth on one side, which you think means easing interest rates. At the same time, they don't want inflation to pop out of the box, so that might potentially slow down that rate cutting. And financial markets have flip-flopped all year in terms of their expectations for interest rates. And just looking into the head to the meetings that are due in the week before Christmas, it's still seen as broadly 50-50 whether the Bank of England cuts rates or not. And the chances of a Fed rate cut are now down to 56%, according to the CME Fed Watch. And over the past month or 2 months, a number of interest rate cuts for 2025 have been priced out. So at
Yeah.
one stage, people were expecting 3.5% base rate from the UK, 3.5% Fed funds rate by next Christmas. That's now 4%. Now, that's partly, I think, down to inflation and the fact that it's just proved sticky and a bit more resilient than people hoped. Partly, maybe the US economy is actually hanging tough. It's still growing and doing better than most people thought. But also, I see the words budget there,
Mm.
down to fears over continued growth in total government deficits in the UK, in Europe, and in America. Now, I know Rachel Reeves is still getting brickbats for her budget, and there's not a lot more I can add there, and I don't want to make her job any harder than it needs to be. If she can draw any comfort at all, it's that although bond yields have gone up to kind of post-trust levels on the 10-year to 4.5%. And they've done so a lot more slowly than they did under Liz Truss. They've done so when the base rate is, 4.5%, not 2.25%. And it's also happening everywhere else. It's happening in France, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in America. So bond vigilantes are I know that clearly bonds are getting a bit of a bid today because of those soft economic numbers. But as interest rates have been coming down, bond yields have been going up. And that's not particularly normal. So somebody somewhere out there in fixed income land is getting windy about either inflation or an American overshoot of growth because of Trump getting stuck in on deregulation and tax cutting, or on deficit accumulation. And all of those things have had bond markets worried. Now, you might think, well, so what, bond schmons? But in the end, if interest rates get to a certain level and returns on cash and bond yields get to a certain level, then that might make them relatively more attractive to equity. So there is an issue there, and you can see it in interest rate sensitive sectors like retail, or sectors that are perceived to be bond proxies that basically trade off their yield relative to bonds like, say, utilities. They've really come under pressure in the last month, 2 months, while those bond yields have been going up. So it can filter through to equities quite quickly. Deceptively, one of the most interest rate sensitive sectors of all is technology, because they're generally long-term secular growth stories. So their cash flows are back-end loaded. So yes, we can value them off PE, but a PE is just a cheats discounted cash flow model effectively. When you aggregate up long-term cash flows, discount them back at an interest rate to derive a net present value that gives you the theoretical value of the equity. And so clearly, the higher the bond yield you use, the lower the net present value is, the lower the net theoretical value of the equity, the lower the share price. And we saw that in 2022. It seems like a long time ago now, with the Mag 7 having gone bananas again this year. But a lot of those stocks came under very heavy pressure in 22 when the Fed was raising rates and tightening policy and bond yields were going up, just because of how the maths work. So this is something that we have to keep in mind if those bond yields keep on going up. Now, if the economic data keeps on getting worse, then that might take some of the heat out of bond yields. But remember, again, equities have priced in a cooling in inflation, a soft economic landing, and interest rate cuts. And it's worked. It's worked out brilliantly this year because inflation has generally cooled. We haven't had a deep recession, and we have had 166 worldwide interest rate cuts. But any divergence from that path could mean things get tricky for equities. So that's why we need to pay attention to what the bond market's saying, because the bond market's giving out a slightly different message from the equity market right now.
Yeah. So it is hard for us, for the Bank of England, knowing what to do. But when you
That's what
think
they're
about
there to
it,
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
they
They are
are only
paid.
human. This is it. Bond market, equity markets are enthralled to central banks and have been ever since Greenspan and the
Yeah.
LTCM bailout in 1998. But they are only human, and they can and do get things wrong. Arthur Burns made an absolute muck of it in the 1970s when he cut interest rates too early at the Fed and let inflation back out the box again. But they are going to we all make mistakes. The unfortunate thing is for the good men and women on the 9 people on the Monetary Policy Committee, their mistakes will be magnified because they're much more publicly scrutinised and important than the ones that you and I take necessarily.
Yeah. But in my mind, if you look at the economic activity, then yes, you have. Where's the inflationary pressures coming from? You've got energy ticking up a little bit, not as aggressive as it was. And then you've got wages, which is quite sticky, of course, because once someone's given a wage increase, it very rarely comes down. So it's not like
Doesn't
food
come down.
prices and commodity and energy. But you realize if you look at what the businesses are saying around the UK, they're highly unlikely to give any more wage increases because the national wage, national insurance contributions, and in fact, they may be even laying people off. So I can't see any economic activity. Can't see stimulus happening through purchasing power, through consumers. So you think you may have a blip in inflation for a while, but that's going to come down surely because we are almost like teaching on recession. Europe is, UK is. It's if
Yeah, I
any
mean,
if you cure
again,
inflation, surely
I mean,
a
yeah,
recession cures it.
well, yeah, but again, I mean, central bankers, you know, they've, they've been saying, look, we don't want to see really big wage increases, which sounds a bit cloth-eared when inflation's been what it's been. And over the last 4 years, the consumer price index is up by 24%.
Mm,
And in the end, that's the number that consumers think about.
yeah.
Economists may think about, oh, the year-on-year growth rate's only
Yeah.
2%, but
Mm,
that cumulative effect is the crushing, because those prices aren't going back down.
hmm
That's it. That consumer
Yeah.
price index, it might slow down, but it ain't going back. If it does go back down, we're in a deflationary spiral, and that's just economic death, given all of the debt that's in the system. So we can't go there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I heard someone say yesterday, I don't know what it was, saying, "Oh, at least inflation's coming down." I thought, no,
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 it's
it isn't
not.
coming down.
It's
And I thought,
slowing down.
Is it? Is it? They said something. So it has come in a bit hotter than expected, 2.3% versus 2.2, but it's better than it was. I thought, no,
No, it
that's
isn't.
on
It's
top of the
rubbish.
11.1% we had
Yeah,
previously. It's like,
exactly. Just
I
honestly, that's
know,
nonsense. So the
I
central
know.
bankers have been saying we don't want lots of wage growth because then you get wages up, wages up, prices up, and there's a spiral. And I get it. It sounds a bit
Mm,
cloth-eared, but I get it.
mm.
Equally, they don't want to cause a deep recession and see mass layoffs either. So they're trying to manage a narrow path between the two, and it isn't easy. And as we know, interest rates take 18 to 24 months to have effect, and it may just be as mortgages roll over and people refinance onto higher rates, you're starting to see that lag effect really bite in terms of
Mm.
consumer confidence and in terms of resale spending. We will see it, but it's a blunt instrument and it comes with a very heavy lag. So again, any
Yeah,
rate cuts that they put through won't have any benefit for again 12, 18, 24 months. So it's a crude instrument that they're using. They're doing their best, but it does mean that you will find it hard to, navigate things beautifully without a shadow
yeah.
of a doubt.
What's odd is as well that we get this very weak data coming out for PMIs and consumer spending, sales. And that's just before the tariffs have come on, the Trump's going to put on. That's, I think we're heading, I mean, I think we're heading into a recession here easily. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean that's a trick. I mean, lots of people see tariffs as inflationary because it just means the prices go up. But as
yeah,
you and I know, what do higher prices mean? Well, generally, eventually, demand goes down, right? So
yeah, yeah,
there's more people out there chirping up now saying actually, if they're implemented, and that's the big question,
yeah,
tariffs are probably potentially tricky, bad for world economic growth. Now, the question is, knowing Trump as we do from his public, because I mean, we've never met him and probably never want to, and he certainly
mm,
wouldn't want to meet us. But you get the impression that a lot of what he does and says is an initial negotiating and bargaining
yeah,
position, because he
yeah,
threatened France and Mexico with tariffs during the last administration and actually didn't do it because they gave him something in return.
hmm
So that's
hmm
my suspicion, is that this is a transact with the exception of China, where I think
yeah,
there is a genuine visceral political philosophical issue there. I think with the others, with the UK, with the EU, it feels like a bargaining chip, and we'll just have to see how
yeah,
it goes. And but
yeah,
overall, the lesson from the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930 was that it made a disinflationary, deflationary situation worse by imposing tariffs, not better. So initially, I think yes, tariffs inflationary. Long run, actually, probably not, because as you say, they dampen demand, they dampen growth. So I think that's what
mm,
everybody's got to be conscious of.
yeah. I just hope he will say, unless you come to the negotiating table, I will impose 10%,
I
rather
think
than
that's probably it.
yeah, rather than impose 10%, they're saying, right, now come to the negotiating table, because it'll be quite complex, but it'll
Yeah,
have a big
speak
hit.
loudly, carry a big stick seems to be his general
Yeah,
tactic. So we'll see what happens.
yeah. In the meantime, my Bitcoin has been the best place to be in the last few weeks.
Well, I can't
And
pretend to be an expert. I mean, gold's done really well, but obviously Bitcoin, digital gold, has shown it a clean pair of fields. But the rationale for that, I mean, for both of them, you can argue, you've got haven demand because of wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and they're very important for oil and gas supply. And there are memories of the 1970s when you got oil price spikes because of wars, and they fed into multiple waves of inflation. So and gold was a brilliant performing asset in the 1970s.
yeah, and
You've
also they
you've
got
got
Gary
fears of
Gensler, didn't
inflation and you've got fears of government deficit accumulation. So
yeah,
again, people are looking for something that protects them from, central banks gambling with inflation to inflate the debt away, or they're looking to dodge higher taxes or mandated investment, whatever it is, they want to be quite out the system with Bitcoin.
yeah.
Um,
And it also got a boost, I think, last night. The Gary Gensler,
Gary,
I think,
again, I was just about to
is
mention regulation. You've clearly got the Trump trade.
yeah,
Uh,
he's standing down, isn't he? So
yeah, he
he was the
wasn't due to
one
leave until
anti.
January 2026, until
Yeah,
spring 2026.
yeah,
But given the grief he was likely to get, I'm not in the least bit surprised that he's stepping down in January 2025. So now it's a matter of who replaces him. But yeah, he's
yeah,
been, from a regulation perspective, pretty tight as far as American regulators go on crypto and many other issues. And clearly, he didn't feel that that was going to be welcome under the Trump situation. So that, again, has definitely been a lift for crypto. People keep asking me, how high can crypto go? And I say, I don't know, because same as gold, in the end, there's no cash flow
yeah.
to measure
It's
there.
hard to value
All
it.
you can do with gold is go off the, you know, incremental cost of production, which technically puts a floor under it at about $1,300, $1,400. what's the incremental cost of mining a Bitcoin? I guess I'd have to look and find out. In terms of electricity
Yeah.
and servers, there will be an incremental cost to it, but I bet it's not $100,000. But
No.
when these things get going, no lemming got a bad press from another lemming, did it? So there's a
Mm.
potential weight
Yeah.
of money argument there. And if you do have governments that you say, well, if you don't invest your money domestically, we will tell you what to do with it. That might just persuade people to actually look for something that's slightly beyond the government's reach, both of which these you could argue they are.
Yeah. I tell you what, whenever Bitcoin has hit previous highs, it does have a volatile trend. It drops like,
Mm.
30, 40, 50, 70% sometimes. So yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
suggest, it's hard to know how far to go, but I wouldn't suggest jumping in here because when it does have a sell-off, they're quite brutal,
Yeah, given the
Uh,
number of questions I've had about it in the last 2 weeks, which is the most I've had in a long time, I would suggest that from a timing perspective now, just on
yeah,
a
yeah,
sentiment
exactly.
perspective, you
Yeah,
feel it might not be the most optimal time.
yeah, exactly.
But I'm not an
Um,
expert on
yeah,
trading by any stretch of the imagination.
no, my optimal time to buy Bitcoin was when I was looking into it. It was $300, and I couldn't find it. It didn't have any Coinbase back then. It was like when it first started, pretty much.
Yeah, well, that
And
was
I
the
read,
really
read
hard
about
bit,
it.
right?
It was $300, and I couldn't get access to it to get these.
Set up wallets and all this
Yeah,
fangle.
well, that paper wallet. So I thought I don't understand this at all. In the end, after 3 hours of researching it, trying to buy some, I thought, oh, I can't be bothered.
And clearly in the
Um,
UK, from an FCA perspective, it's still very difficult. They still aren't very
yeah,
keen. So again, I've got to be careful what I say there because the
yeah,
FCA is monitoring this extremely closely, just as the SEC is in America.
yeah, yeah. Marvelous stuff. Thanks, for that Russ, and
Keep
speak in a
warm.
few weeks' time. Cheers, man. Yeah, I tried to. Yeah.